this kind of mythical, illusory picture of just what a living hell Washington, D.C. is, doesn't equate with the picture.
Seeing the right wing using the city as a synonym for all that they find distasteful in politics, choosing to deploy effectively soldiers to its streets to try and police a law and order problem which does not exist. That is chilling, but it's basically imploring him to do the same with other cities across the United States. Yet again, just another crazy day in Trump world.
Our capital city has been overtaken by violent gangs and bloodthirsty criminals, roving mobs of wild youth, drugged out maniacs and homeless people, and we're not going to let it happen anymore.
That is Donald Trump not getting the job as Chief Marketing Officer for Washington Tourism. The hellscape he paints of Washington to justify bringing in the National Guard, people trained to fight wars, is extraordinary. Is this an authoritarian president going too far? Or is it a trap that he's laying for his Democrat rivals? Welcome to the Newsagents. It's John.
And it's Lewis, still in Nevada.
Oh, you're still in Nevada. Oh, interesting.
Put it this way, John, after last night at Caesar's Palace, any hope of any further trips for the rest of the year for you have long since evaporated. We're going to have to sell that dog bed that Emily brings in half the time.
Honestly, I tell you what, we're going to talk about law and order in Washington, D.C. and what Donald Trump's doing. But what I heard about what you got up to last night, Christ, they've got a problem in Nevada as well now.
Everything on red, always everything on red. Never works.
Very good. Look, so what Donald Trump has done is quite extraordinary. I mean, you kind of hear about, the martial law and things like that. It's not that what Donald Trump has done. But he is bringing in the National Guard to take over policing in Washington, D.C., FBI officers being redeployed from their duties for nighttime patrols in the Capitol, which Donald Trump describes as this hellhole, this carnage of this city of carnage. And it doesn't really equate with reality that much. And so you have to look at what the political motivations are behind this and what the spark for this has been. And there seem to have been two things. One is that a member of DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency, a young guy, was beaten up, mugged, left bloodied and bruised, and his picture became everywhere, and that caught Donald Trump's attention. And the other thing is Donald Trump driving to his golf course outside of Washington, D.C., and going past homeless people on the Whitehurst Freeway or wherever it happens to be, going up to Rock Creek. And there are lots of tents there, it's true. And Donald Trump thinking, we've got to get rid of all these people out of the city. That seems to have been the spark in this past week, which has resulted in this announcement by Trump that the feds are taking over.
Yeah, I think this is a fascinating, and I think you don't have to believe that it is the sort of full federalization of American law and order. You don't have to believe that it is necessarily the final descent into authoritarianism, though it is undoubtedly an authoritarian move, to believe that this is a disturbing and chilling development. And it is part of the piece of the kind of long development of Trump as someone who at the very least indulges in very strong authoritarian tendencies, who has that authoritarian streak to his politics, right? There's a lot going on. One is Trump's politics is a politics which needs enemies, real and imagined. And throughout his entire career, this predates his political years. There has been a gene within Trump which has railed against the politics of the cities, right? In the 1970s and 1980s, what is he doing? He's taking out full-blown ads in the newspapers, basically railing against black crime, railing against crime the whole of the time. And that is part of the longer pedigree as well, and part of this makeup, right? Which goes beyond Trump and before Trump, and has long been part now of Republican politics, which is using the cities. And we see the glimmers of this in our own politics increasingly. Seeing the right wing using the city as a synonym for all that they find distasteful in politics. And that has a particularly ugly history in the United States, because the cities so often, or the breakdown of law and order, this goes back to Richard Nixon talking about law and order in the cities. For so many voters, when they hear about cities and they hear about chaos, what do they really hear? They basically hear poor black voters. And that is a long kind of seam that has run within politics that Trump, once again, he's done it before, Trump is resurrecting. Despite the fact that, as we know, with regards to crime, this is just a phantom. It's a phantom fight. As I say, it's real, and it's, in this case, it's not real. It's imagined, because we know that crime in Washington, D.C. is actually at a 30-year low. So the actual basis for this intervention of sending the National Guard in does not exist.
Yeah. So let's just go into those figures in a bit more detail. According to the Metropolitan Police Department of Washington, D.C., MPDC, violent offences fell after peaking in 2023 and in 2024, and they've hit their lowest level in 30 years. They're continuing to fall. That's according to preliminary data in 2025. Violent crime overall is down 26% this year compared to the same point in 2024, and robbery is down 28%. So this kind of mythical, illusory picture of just what a living hell Washington, D.C. is doesn't equate with the picture. And just for laughs, let us play you Donald Trump speaking in May, when, for different political reasons, he wanted to emphasise how great Washington, D.C. is.
Crime is down in Washington, D.C. Street crime, violent crime by 25%. And people have seen, they've noticed a big difference.
So you have Donald Trump just in May, I mean, it's not that long ago, talking about how much safer DC was. I think the other part of it, and Lewis, you're absolutely right to talk about the not so much creeping authoritarianism as authoritarianism from Donald Trump, is trying to lay a political trap for the Democrats. I'm tough on law and order. Are you? Why are you opposing this? And, you know, I think the population of DC is around 500,000, maybe 750,000 if you include the sort of metropolitan area around it. 320 million Americans do not live in Washington, D.C. And of course, all the cities that he's talking about are cities that are run by Democrat mayors. There's no coincidence there. And if you look at what's happening in terms of the sweep against illegal immigration, it's being done in a much more rough and aggressive manner in Democrat-run cities than it is in Republican areas.
People who live in Washington, D.C., or indeed any city, should be able to expect that the President of the United States, whoever it is, does not, on the basis of a lie, on the basis of phantom figures, on the basis of, as you say, John, just pure political imperative, should not have to expect or deal with a national government, the federal government, choosing to deploy effectively soldiers to its streets to try and police a law and order problem which does not exist. That is chilling. That is worrying, and taken as part of the wider slide that we're seeing towards authoritarian politics in the United States. Looks at what's going on with the redistricting, which we talked about on the show down in Texas, and the fact that right now the governor of Texas is basically bringing in the FBI to try and hunt down democratically elected lawmakers, to drag them back to the state capitol in Texas to vote on completely corrupt, completely bent, completely dodgy redistricting provisions that Trump has just insisted out of nowhere he wants, because he knows that he's almost certainly going to lose the House of Representatives in 2026, and then his administration, which is corrupt in lots of different ways, is going to be subject to all sorts of investigations from a Democrat-controlled House. So, you take it as part of the wider piece. It is worrying and it is chilling and also completely useless, right? We've been down this road before, right? So much happens in Trump world, it's easy to forget. He's done this with Los Angeles earlier in the year, where he decided to send in the National Guard, basically for no reason, or slightly more reason there is in DC, but after the riots that we saw in Los Angeles. And as Governor Gavin Newsom, Democrat, was saying yesterday, half the time they send them in, they don't have anything to do. It's not entirely clear what they're actually doing when they're there. They're basically just doing paperwork and bureaucracy and pen pushing. So it is pure politics, pure theatre, but with a deeply sinister bent to it, in my view.
Yeah, and I want to say this as someone who's lived in DC for many years. Look, it is a city that has its problems. There are homeless people. There are people with serious mental illness who are living on the streets, who will sometimes shout out loud at you and, whatever else. I think any city, anywhere in the world, you are going to encounter things like that. But
people shout at you all the time down the street. Doesn't matter where
exactly.
you are.
Normally you after you've lost out badly at Caesar's Palace.
I know.
But the picture of it as just being this dangerous place where people live in fear to cross the street or walk down the road or go to the shop just does not equate to reality. I'm telling you, I've never felt safer in any city, I think, anywhere in the world than I did in Washington, D.C., for 7.5 years. And that wasn't just confining myself to the Northwest Quadrant, which is, the kind of where all the diplomats live and others. It's the rest of the city as well. It just doesn't feel real. And you just think, well, this is a confection partly for political ends. And it is also about Donald Trump knowing that being macho is a good thing with his base. It goes down well. And of course, maybe, just maybe, this distracts from another problem that he also faces right now, and that is his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. Pete Buttigieg, the former transportation secretary under Joe Biden, certainly thinks that's a part of it.
As we speak, the federal government is taking over the policing of a major American city, Washington, D.C. The president is doing this not in order to make the city safer, that's the job of local law enforcement, but to solve his own political problems. He needs to get his base talking and thinking about something besides his refusal to open up the Epstein files because he's mixed up in them. And he wants the rest of the country focused on something, anything, besides the work that he has done and continues to do to kick millions of Americans off of their health insurance, to close down rural hospitals, and to undermine basic functions of our government in order to pay for tax cuts for the wealthiest.
So that's Pete Buttigieg. And of course it is a classic attack from Democrat opponents to say he's trying to deflect attention. But we do know that is what Donald Trump does. It's flooding the zone, it's giving endless stories and asking people, don't look here, look there. And where he wants people to look now is at the lawlessness of the American city, and the only place you can feel safe is in the suburbs or rural areas, but I'm going to do something about it. It is part of what Donald Trump has been for years. And you talked back in the day, Lewis, of him taking out adverts. He was very often wrong. He called for the capital punishment to be meted out to the Central Park Five over an alleged assault and rape. And the fact of the matter is that the Central Park Five were released and wrongfully convicted. So Donald Trump has a history of this, but it doesn't mean he's always on the right side of history.
The thing as well, John, that I find, as I say, sort of chilling, or the other thing that I find chilling, is I think that we do see glimmers of this in our own politics. That this role that the city has come to have, and as I say, to some extent, it has been part of sort of right-wing politics for a long time, going all the way back to Richard Nixon, running against the city, Republicans and the right wing setting up cities as being these kind of infernos of chaos and destruction and drugs and crime and race tension and race riots and all of these sorts of things. And sometimes there is a kernel of truth to any or all of those things, but they are become grossly exaggerated. That's been a feature of American politics for a long time. We see it more and more in British politics as well. We talked about it on the show a little bit before, particularly online and in the online right. London increasingly being set up as this kind of hellhole, this kind of dystopian nightmare where crime is completely out of control. You can barely walk out of your house without getting beaten up or your possessions stolen from you or taken from you, where fare evasion is completely rampant on the tube, where the tube is looking like kind of Gotham City or something like that from a sort of 1990s Batman film. On and on it goes. They're being used, usually often in a completely exaggerated way, by people who know that they're not really like that, for their own political ends. And I think you can see a direct line between that sort of American politics, a politics that Trump has intensified and augmented, and a lever that he pulls on whenever he's in a little bit of trouble, which, as you say, John, he is at the moment related to the Epstein stuff. And you're seeing that being replicated in British politics as well, from very, very mainstream figures. And I think that is just part of politics, which again is just another part of the way that the right, the radical right in particular, across the Atlantic now acts as one and the same, and ideologically, ideationally, philosophically, is increasingly fused.
Well, it is a Trump import. I mean, when Donald Trump was over here most recently, the other week, opening up his golf course in Aberdeen, who was the one British politician that he spoke about? Sadiq Khan, the Mayor of London. How did he speak about Sadiq Khan? In the most disparaging terms about what a terrible job he's done in London. I wish someone had asked, what specifically do you think that Sadiq Khan has done wrong? Just because I bet you Donald Trump has got no idea, but it is that thing that you demonize.
I hate you, Les. I hate you, Les.
I only like high emission zones.
Yeah, exactly.
But you can see that is exactly what it is. And I remember being there and having Americans tell me about the no-go zones in British cities, and they're too dangerous to walk around at night. And you just thought, I don't know what you're talking about. I just have no idea what you are talking about. And I'm sure there are many DC residents who are similarly today wandering around the city, going about their ordinary lives and thinking, just feels to me like it felt yesterday and the day before, and it's kind of not perfect, but it's pretty damn good.
And the worrying thing is, in terms of kind of the stability of American politics, which obviously feels less and less stable with us every passing week and every passing month, the concerning thing is Trump was very clear in that presser yesterday. He's not just going to confine it to DC. There are other cities that he's got his eye on. Why would he? I mean, on the basis purely of the crime figures alone, if you're going to accept that as actually the criterion for what he's doing, there are Democrat-controlled cities across the United States which are in way worse shape than Washington, D.C., particularly with regards to drugs and fentanyl and all sorts of other things. So why would he stop? And he was very, very clear that this is just the beginning. And that central tension that has dominated American politics for so long, once again, i.e. the battle between the tension between the federal government and states' rights and cities' rights, and the imperative for the federal government not to overuse its power or to overstep the mark. It used to be, of course, the Republican Party was the party which was most concerned about that. Once again, Trump has just inverted absolutely everything. And now you've got Republican senators, Republican congressmen, you name it, cheering to the rafters an American president who is choosing to federalize not just the police operations of Washington, D.C. The federal government has always had a bigger hand in what goes on in Washington and other cities, but is basically imploring him to do the same with other cities across the United States. Yet again, just another crazy day in Trump world.
I suppose the only thing about this, if he does go down the route of taking over the policing in Philadelphia, Chicago, Pittsburgh, you name it, wherever else where there are problems, LA, San Francisco, it becomes his problem then. If you don't suddenly see a massive reduction in violent crime and a massive reduction in drugs offences and a massive reduction in homelessness and homicides.
But he'll just claim there has been one.
Yeah.
I mean, he'll just claim that there has been one, right?
He'll sack whoever's in charge of the statistics and appoint someone much more to his liking.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. We've played it all before.
I have no objection to the US Vice President coming to Britain. What I object to is the over-the-top American security circus that is causing significant disruption to us. And, I think the Americans could learn a little from our own royal family. Our royal family manages to get around the country with minimum security, minimum disruption to people's lives. And it's fairly outrageous that we end up paying for this.
Oh, sir, what don't you understand? Americans don't do minimum of fuss. When the president or vice president move, it is a projection of power, of might, of size, of being the world's superpower. And therefore you need an entourage of 16 vehicles, Suburbans, armoured, blacked out windows, power on show for everyone to see. And yeah, they may be clogging up those lovely Cotswolds lanes, but let's face it, you'd have to be dealing with probably a flock of sheep or a tractor towing a trailer or maybe even a combine harvester crossing from one field to the other. The Americans are here and we've got to get used to it. I loved the story of the guy who was at one place and he looked out from the gym that he was kind of working out in across a field and saw a guy with dark glasses, black suit, white shirt, black tie, and thought, nah, you're not the local farmer. You are Secret Service. They are swarming the Cotswolds like hornets or wasps, disrupting your afternoon cream tea. The honeyed stone of bucolic villages will never be the same. Welcome to England, JD Vance. We'll be back tomorrow. We'll see you then. Bye-bye.
The Newsagents. This is a Global Player original podcast.